Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Jim Mayola, and we are interviewing Mr. Paul Smith. It is Tuesday, June 29th, 2010, and this video recording is for the Community Media Center's Oral History Project. And Paul, you're going to tell me a little bit about yourself. I understand you're a man with a lot of stories. So let's start off with, first of all, what year were you born?
1924.
Okay. So how
And
old is
I
it?
was born up near Libertytown.
Mm-hmm.
My father and his father had lived on a 750-acre farm right outside of Libertytown.
Okay.
They did a lot of work for the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
The nuns used to come out and pick flowers for the altar and different things.
Sure.
And then just before I was born, my father moved on to a smaller farm which he owned. And that's where I was born.
Mm-hmm.
But there was 14 brothers and sisters.
Wow. Big family.
14 of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the youngest.
Okay.
And my oldest brother had a son who was old enough to have been my father when I was born.
No kidding.
So it was a spread out family.
Yeah.
And there were two wives.
Mm-hmm.
My father was married twice.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I was about 4 years old, they were tearing down these slave cabins
Mm-hmm.
on the farm.
Okay.
And I remember they were exceptional looking slave cabins, something that you wouldn't think about. The parts that faced the original house, the
Mm-hmm.
big house,
Mm-hmm.
were stone because the house was stone.
Okay.
But the backs of them then were wood.
Mm-hmm.
But there were 5
Mhm.
slave cabins
Mm-hmm.
that, and they had their own spring house.
Mm-hmm.
They had a walk down to it. The big house had their own spring house.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very interesting place, and it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
And the lady who bought it, there was a door in the living room, the parlor, which had been closed. My mother had had it closed
Mm-hmm.
because it faced the north, and it was cold air came in.
Sure.
So she had it closed. Well, when this lady got to delving into it and found out that it was called a funeral door, that was where they took the casket out so they didn't come out in front of the family who
Mhm.
was sitting in the hallway.
Right.
And when she found that out, then she immediately had the door opened.
Mm-hmm.
So it now has a door there. It's not
Interesting.
stoned up anymore.
Now, was the farm in your family hundreds of years ago? When did your family obtain the farm?
My father had it just before they moved by maybe 10 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
It hadn't been too long.
So this is the early
They had lived, as I say, he and his father had lived on this rented farm
Oh, okay.
for 75 years.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But in the meantime, he bought this other farm,
Mm-hmm.
and then I don't know, I guess it was when some of the family had left
Mm-hmm.
that he needed more help
Mm-hmm.
and didn't have it, you know.
Right.
And but my mother used to comment that she never knew how many people were going to be for dinner. They had the table in the kitchen seated 18.
Mm-hmm.
Then they had 3 dining rooms. And she said usually at least 2 of the dining rooms were filled. with help.
Amazing.
See, they lived right next to Libertytown, and the people wanted work, and they would come out there, and my father would hire them. Whether he needed them or didn't need them, he would hire them, and they knew that, so they came and.
So your mother did a lot of cooking.
Well, she had 5 black ladies working for her.
Okay.
So she did very little work, but she supervised the, planned the meals
kitchen,
and supervised everything. But physically doing the work, she didn't do too much.
Now, what did they do exactly on the farm? What kind of a farm was it?
It was kind of a dairy farm type. They had a lot of cows and had horses, and I think he had 3 teams of horses. And at one time, they were all sorrels, the same color.
Wow.
Some of them had white faces, some had stars in their head, but they were all the same color.
So they farmed with teams of horses?
Yeah.
No tractors?
No.
Amazing.
No, I don't think my father ever owned a tractor. My brother, after he took over the farm, he did have a tractor.
Now, being born in 1924, that's before the Depression.
Yes.
So what were your experiences during the Depression? You grew up during that time, so I'm sure you...
Yeah, it was, I was just 5 or 6 years old, actually. And I don't remember much about it because living on a farm like that, we really didn't want for anything.
Sure.
We didn't realize that there was a depression, basically, I don't think. But
well, you were self-contained, you raised your own crops, you had your cows.
Yes.
And so you basically...
And they sold the milk, and as I say, the original farm was right next to Libertytown, and my father used to furnish milk to just about every house in Libertytown. And
now this is right on 26 in Frederick, is that correct? Route 26 in Libertytown?
In Libertytown,
yes, right.
Yeah. Frederick County.
Yes. Okay.
And when they moved south on that same road, almost to Unionville.
Oh, okay.
And had the house.
So what kind of chores did you have as a young boy on the farm?
Very few.
Very few?
Very few.
Well, you were the youngest of 14?
I was the youngest of 14.
Did that mean you were pampered?
I was pampered, obviously. But I not as much pampered as they didn't need my help, actually.
Okay.
And I didn't, I did milk a cow or two when they were milking. And I used to dish out the feed for the cows sometimes, but I did very little.
It wasn't a requirement. It wasn't something you had to do every day?
No.
Okay.
No.
What did you do for entertainment? What kind of fun things did you do?
Well, now that was, you kind of did your own thing, like I had a wagon which I rode around, you know, where you put your knee on one and work the pedal, or use your other leg for the pedal. And I didn't have a bicycle. I don't think any of us in the family ever had bicycles. But especially at Christmas time, we used to go kris-kringling.
And what is
You
that?
know what I'm?
No.
Oh, you dressed up and wore a mask
Okay.
and went to visit people,
Mm-hmm.
and then they would, tell you who you were, or keep asking questions until they found out, and then you always had something to eat.
Sure.
They'd have cake and
Mm-hmm.
whatever, and it was called kris-kringling.
Okay. So you went from neighbor to neighbor.
Uh-huh.
Sort of like a takeoff on Halloween the kids do now, where they
Yeah.
go around and
Yeah.
collect candy, but it was more of a socialization, it sounds
Right,
like.
yeah. And you went to the places that you knew,
Of course.
and it was a lot of activity and a lot of good things came out. You met some new people along the way sometimes, but most of them were old friends.
I bet it was an exciting time, though.
Yes.
A special event for a
Yes.
youngster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, especially.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as I say, I was the youngest.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of tagged along everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody went, I tagged. And sometimes I don't even think they knew I was there. But but it was an interesting time.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out when I was in the second grade in school. The first grade, I kind of skipped through. I don't remember much about that.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember in the second grade, the teacher sent me to the principal. And when they finally got my mother involved, they wanted me to go to special classes. I had such a high IQ, which I had no idea about,
Sure,
because I didn't even know what the IQ was at that
yeah.
time. But anyway, before I got really involved in it, it kind of collapsed. That where they were sending the privileged kids off to these special schools.
Mm-hmm.
And I just went along with the class, and if I wanted to play, the teacher let me play.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, when I got a little older, I knew not to play, and I kind of did my own education thing.
But you stayed in the regular school.
Yeah.
What school was that, Paul?
Well, it was Liberty High School.
Liberty High
but
School.
It was all 12 grades,
All in one school.
all in one school.
So when you started school, you basically stayed with the same group of students through the whole 12
Right.
years. Mm-hmm.
Stayed in the same building. Yeah. For the whole 12 years.
Now, as the youngest in the family, can you recall what the age difference was for the oldest one, your oldest brother or sister? You mentioned that you had a brother who had a son that was old enough to be your father.
That's right.
So that sounds like there might have been a 20 or 30 year difference.
Oh, there was more than 30.
More than 30 years.
Yep.
So you had brothers then that probably had been born before the turn of the century. They were born in the 1800s.
I would say so. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Any experience?
See, my father was married twice.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So there were 5 of us with the second mother.
Okay.
And there were 9 in the first.
With the first.
mother.
Yeah. Now, any family stories about World War I? It hadn't taken place too far after you were born.
No, not really. I don't remember hearing much about World War I. And the Depression, I think I may have realized there was a Depression, but as I said, we lived on a farm,
So it really
and
didn't.
we did not realize that you had to do without things.
Well, you grew your own food, and
Yeah,
you took care of
right,
yourself.
and
Sure.
we took care of ourselves. And
What about World War II?
well, I was in World War II. Let's see, I graduated in 1942 from high school, and I went to college for 1 year, and then was drafted, and I went to we got on the train, and we headed north. We thought we were going to Pennsylvania. Well, we did go to Pennsylvania, but then the next thing we know, we realized that the train was not going north anymore. It was going south. So we ended up in Louisiana.
No, that's pretty far south.
That's pretty far south.
Yeah.
And so we got there, and the next morning when we fell out for Reveille, I had, with two other fellas, we thought if we asked for the same outfit that we could stay together. So we asked to be put in the medics. That's why I got in it. And we did, we all got in the medics, but they got in medical battalion.
Right.
I got in a medical detachment.
Okay.
And so the very first day, we fell out for Reveille, and they asked if there was anybody that could type, and nobody made any comments. And then finally he says, I need somebody to type. And I said, well, I'm not a typist. I said, I hit and peck, and but I'm pretty accurate. So anyway, he tells me to go to the office, and it's the medical detachment. So I went there and met the doctor, who was a captain at that time, and he put me at this desk right by his, and that was my spot and I typed the morning report, and that was basically all I typed. The rest of it was more into involvement in taking care of people. And he quickly found out that I was pretty intent on learning things, and I did made capsules. I gave shots, and in fact the colonel came in one day, and he needed a shot, and the doctor was going to give him a shot, and he says, oh no, he says, I want him to give me the shot. He says he does a better job.
No kidding.
So anyway, I had picked up a little bit of a reputation on giving shots. They seemed to, when they lined up, I usually had the biggest line. But
So after the war, did you spend the whole war at the base? Were you down?
no.
Okay.
Went overseas.
Okay.
I was in England for about 4 months. Then went across the channel, and this was another episode. My particular job, I didn't have a vehicle. I rode in the ambulance. Well, the ambulance driver was not the world's best driver. So when we went across the English Channel on an LST, and we get on the other side, and he's backing the ambulance with me in it. He and I are both in it, backing it off the boat.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't back it the right way, and we went right down in the water.
No kidding.
Yeah, right in the Seine River. Got soaked.
I
Got
bet.
soaked. So then I didn't ride with him all the time. I know several times the colonel, it was cold weather, it was winter, and he would get cold riding in his open Jeep,
Mm-hmm.
and he used to come and kick me out of the ambulance, and I'd ride in the Jeep, and he'd ride in the ambulance for a while,
Where it was warm.
where it was warm.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a interesting time. I went through, we went into fighting in the Battle of the Bulge, at the relief of the Battle of the Bulge,
Mm-hmm.
and then did a few other areas of battle. And I ended up, after the war, the actual fighting was over, I was still there, still needed to serve,
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't have enough points. And I was in Pilsen, Czechoslovakia, and I'll never forget this, but after I retired and everything, I went to Louisiana
Mm-hmm.
and dancing on the riverboats.
Hmm.
Oh, that was something else. Later, I danced, and I would ride the riverboats. And this one lady I danced with on the riverboat, and she told me she was 92, and that she had a heavy accent. And I said, "Where in Europe did you come from?" And she said, "Austria." And I said, "Oh, I was never in Austria," but I said I was in Czechoslovakia.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to go to Pilsen every Sunday to the concerts. And she laughed. She said, "I lived for 4 years in Pilsen."
No kidding.
And she used to go to those concerts. Well, anyway, she and her daughter and son-in-law, she was telling me they had already signed up for the next year to go on this river cruise.
Mm-hmm.
They had been doing it for 15 years.
Wow.
They did it every year, the
Mm-hmm.
three of them. And so I could see where they would, because it was an interesting thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I got around a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I had a more or less interesting life. Never married. I did have an episode when I was in Czechoslovakia, and but the girl I was with was killed in an automobile accident on the Autobahn before we got married anyway. And I'm running down now.
Well, let me ask you something. You mentioned after the war, you came back to the United States and you were doing dancing on a riverboat?
Oh, I just did that for pleasure.
Just for fun?
Yeah.
Okay.
I went to work at the bank.
Oh, okay.
I worked 43 years at
Oh,
the bank.
okay.
And I went from just working,
Mm-hmm.
and I was vice president when
Okay.
I retired.
So you worked from a teller all the way up to a vice president in 43
Well, I
years.
was never really a teller. I worked in the lending area
Okay.
more.
Mm-hmm.
I used to lend money to people.
Now, was that in Carroll County? Or was
No,
that
Baltimore.
in Baltimore?
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Baltimore and St. Paul.
Okay.
Actually, the bank is still there.
Downtown? Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was in the original building,
Mm-hmm.
which is at Baltimore and St. Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And then tore that building down and built a new one.
Mm-hmm.
And I went back into that one, and my office was on the 5th floor, and I could look right down Light Street.
Yes. Yeah, down
Yeah.
towards the Inner Harbor.
Right.
Yeah.
And the first day I was there in the office, the colonel came through. They were showing him the different offices.
Mm-hmm.
And my captain said, "This is Paul's office." And then they went into his office.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when he looked out his window, he looked at the roof of the McDonald's
Sure.
store. That was what he saw. And the colonel said, "Why in the world did you take this office and not the one that you could look down?" And he said, "Well, we picked the offices without knowing
Mm-hmm.
where they were. We
Mm-hmm.
didn't, you just did it from a floor plan."
Sure.
And he said, "I'm not about to move him out." So I had my good office,
Fantastic.
and I used to, we had a console there right under the window. And that's where the telephone was. And when it would ring, I'd just twirl my chair around, put my feet up on the console, and talk on the phone.
And had a beautiful view.
Yep.
Wow. How
Yep.
great.
Yeah, I could watch the
Yeah,
people cross
Sure.
over to the harbor, and yeah, it was.
Now, were you living in Baltimore then, Paul, or were you living in Carroll County?
No, I lived in Baltimore.
You lived in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Okay.
I started out Greenmount Avenue and 23rd Street
Mm-hmm.
was my first, and that from there I used to walk to work.
No
It was
kidding.
28 blocks.
Wow.
I used to walk to work every morning.
Almost 3 miles.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
And then I moved farther out, and walking was out of the question.
Sure.
So I had thought I would ride the bus and then get out and walk some.
Mhm.
But you don't do that.
No.
Once you're on the bus, you ride it.
Ride it all the
through.
way in, yeah. Now,
And,
now, what year was it? Can you recall what year it was when you started working at the bank in Baltimore?
it was about 47, 48.
Okay, so you'd finished with your stint in the military, and you started your career in the late 40s.
Right, yeah.
What was Baltimore like in the late 40s?
I don't. It was developing, let's say. I was developing with it, actually.
Sure.
And I enjoyed every bit of my time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I ever did anything that I didn't appreciate or like or whatnot.
So you got to see Baltimore City grow into a very vibrant center of commerce.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. And I grew with it because
Absolutely.
we, but then toward the end, I moved up here
Mm-hmm.
and commuted
Mm-hmm.
back and forth. At one time, I owned a piece of property up in above Emmitsburg,
Mm-hmm.
which is a kind of a development, and I never did build on it, but I had planned to
Mm-hmm.
use that and then commute to work. Well, I found out that that was too far
That would have been a long commute.
to commute.
Yes.
You would be tired all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't do that. I eventually sold the property, and fortunately I sold it because after I sold it, they found out that you couldn't have water. It didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what. I don't think there's anything on it now. I think it's just there. But I was very fortunate in most things, in meeting people and all different things.
Mm-hmm. So you moved back to Carroll County and commuted from Carroll County to Baltimore for a number of years towards the end of your career.
Yeah, it was maybe 5, 6 years.
And you've lived here ever since?
Yeah.
Okay. Now,
Yep.
where did you originally move to in Carroll County?
Westminster.
Mm-hmm.
My sister and brother-in-law lived in Westminster,
Mm-hmm.
and I stayed there for a while, and then I got an apartment,
Mm-hmm.
and then I moved over in this area,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been here ever since.
Over here in Hampstead. Mm-hmm. Nice place to live, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
And I think these are really nice condos.
Mhm.
They're, you have a good group of people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on the board,
Mhm.
and we had a meeting last night, actually.
Yeah, Carroll County is a nice place to live in. It really is. Let me go back to Baltimore for a few minutes, if I could. In the late 40s and the early 50s, that was when we were starting to have, we were seeing a change in technology in our country and in our culture. Did you live in an apartment or a house in Baltimore? Did you rent when you first moved to Baltimore? Apartment.
Yeah.
Did you have a phone in your apartment? Do you recall?
Yeah, I think I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about a television?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Shortly after moving. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
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 And in those days, what was television like?
Not too much.
Yeah. That was.
It was actually, it was just an extra thing. It wasn't now it's the thing.
Right.
Everybody does.
Mm-hmm.
But then it was just an extra thing. I did more out of bounds work,
Mm-hmm.
I was very involved in the church,
Mm-hmm.
and I joined the Westminster Methodist Church back in 1950,
Oh, okay.
and I've been a member there ever
Mhm.
since. And I've been involved in just about everything that you can think of.
No kidding. So you joined that church when you were living in Baltimore.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And what
Used to come up every weekend to
fantastic, yeah.
my sisters.
Well, you had family. Yeah, sure.
Mhm.
So you've been tied to this community in a number of ways
Oh,
for a
yeah.
number of years.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
where's the Westminster? Which church are you talking about? Which one? Is that the one on Main Street?
Main and Center.
Main and Center, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, yesterday I went there to prepare dinner
Mhm.
for Soup Kitchen,
Mm-hmm.
which I do 3 of the 4 weeks out of the month. The one week I don't get involved in Soup Kitchen, but I do 3 other weeks.
So you stay very active in the community.
And I enjoy it very much. They tell me I'm a good cook. I don't know. I don't basically now do that much cooking, but it's usually my menu.
Mhm.
We have a thing where it's a paper clip, and there must be 40 or 50 menus on
Mhm.
there, all of which are mine.
Wow.
And so whatever they make, I had a hand in it originally.
Have you ever thought about putting together a church cookbook of your menus?
Not really.
That might be an idea. It might be a nice fundraiser
Yeah,
for the church.
yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
Now, isn't that the church where Andy Spang is the
Yes.
music director?
Yes, and
Yes.
that's something that he just this past Sunday
Mhm.
resigned.
Oh, that's too bad. He's such a fine musician,
I know.
and he's done such
And
amazing
they're
work for
having
so
a
long.
meeting Wednesday,
Mm-hmm.
which I hadn't intended to go to, but
Mm-hmm.
since I've been hearing so much about this, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to go and
Mm-hmm.
just see what the story is.
Yeah, because that church has always been renowned for its musical program.
Yes,
It's a fine
yes,
program.
and several of the musicians
Mm-hmm.
have been let go,
Mm.
and I want to see what is involved.
It may have to do with money, funding. These are
Well,
tight economic times.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be better. We have two ministers.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we don't need two ministers. It would be better to have a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of music.
As a musician myself, I am a firm believer that music has a very important part of our society in every facet, especially
Yep.
with religion.
Yep.
It's very
Yep.
important. So that's just my opinion, though.
Yep.
Certainly can add a lot to the services. And the quality of music that your church has been noted for has
Always been exceptional.
exceptional.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. We have, or we had quite a few standouts.
Well, Andy Spang himself is world class. I mean,
Yes.
he's really
Oh, yes.
an amazing musician in a
I
number of
couldn't
ways.
believe it Sunday when he directed a small group, and then he announced that
Mhm.
that would be his last. And I thought, I can't believe this. I really can't believe it. And then today, when we were counting money, they were discussing different things,
Mhm.
and I find out more of them have been let go.
Well, it's very disappointing.
And I certainly would be the first one to make the comment that if we want to leave somebody go to save money, let's leave one of the ministers go. We don't need two ministers. We always had it with one minister.
Mhm.
Why do we suddenly need two?
I don't know, but change is always a hard thing. It's always a very difficult thing. And I'll bet, Paul, that you've seen a lot of change in your life, haven't you?
Oh my, yeah.
A lot of
Yeah.
change. In
Yeah.
your lifetime, people went from farming with horses to
Yes.
farming with tractors.
Yes.
Houses with no electricity to almost every house has a computer nowadays. Homes with no running water and no telephones, and now we just take all of that for granted.
Yes. Yes. Yep.
Is there anything else that you can think of to share with me, Paul?
I can't think of anything.
I'm sure something will come to mind in,
Yeah.
5 minutes after I walk out the door. It always does. Is there anything that if you had a piece of advice to a youngster coming up today? You grew up just over in Frederick County and came of age in a big family, in a farm, living on a farm, pretty much self-sufficient. It didn't seem like, even though you lived during the Depression, that it made much of an impact on your family because you took care of yourselves.
It actually, during the Depression, I would have not known that there was a Depression.
Would you have any advice for youngsters coming up today? This is a different time. We're in a different world now. But what advice could you share with kids coming up today?
Gee, I don't know. Get involved.
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest thing.
Sure.
Don't blame somebody for something. If you weren't involved, you have no idea what's the story,
And give me some examples of the kind of involvement that kids can get into today. What would you suggest?
Well, we have a lot of programs for the kids in the church that they can get especially involved in helping others.
Sure.
And I don't know if you know, but back of the parish house, from the parish house to the alley,
Mm-hmm.
was a lawn, which now is gardens,
Mm-hmm.
and people can donate stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and then the what food is collected is given to charities,
Mm-hmm.
which is a big thing. You know,
Yeah. So
when they started talking about it, you didn't think that much about it,
Right.
but it is quite a bit of food.
yeah, it's kind of taken off. You know, that's another thing we took for granted. I've seen pictures of Westminster that around the turn of the century, every house had a garden.
Yes,
Today, no houses
no
have gardens.
houses have gardens.
So having a garden is a big deal, and then you grow the food and collect the food for the needy, which is a
Yeah.
very, very good thing. You
Yeah.
know, Paul, one of the things that's interesting is all the children today to graduate from high school, you have to have 75 service hours. You've just given them some great ideas for ways that they could get their service hours working, and they can pick the church
Sure.
of their choice, whatever's close by, and get involved in a program. If they didn't want to do something religious, there's all kinds of other
Sure.
programs
Yeah.
all around the community that they
Yes.
can get involved in.
Yes,
But getting involved is important.
yes. Yeah, I've been very fortunate, I
Mhm.
think, and being involved is one of the big things
Mhm.
that I am fortunate that I did.
It'll keep you young, won't it?
Yes,
Hmm.
yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm 85, you
Mhm.
know.
It's hard to believe. It keeps
It
your
is
mind,
for me even.
well, it keeps
Yeah.
your mind sharp.
Yeah.
You stay active and involved. You live longer. What are the biggest changes that you've seen from when you were a youngster?
Uh, I don't know. Uh, really don't know. I've went with the time
Mm-hmm.
and been involved in so many things. I just like being around.
Mm-hmm.
I love being around people.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I make out so well in soup kitchen
Sure.
and stuff like that.
Sure.
Now, this past week we had 89 people in soup kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of
That's a
people.
lot of people.
We have had over 100, but it mostly runs in the 80s, 90s.
Do you see more people in the winter than you do in the summer?
Yes.
Normally, okay.
Yes.
So seeing
Yes.
89 people in the middle of the summer, I mean, we're just getting ready to hit the 4th of July. We're just going into July. To see that many people in Westminster this time of the year says something about the economy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I'm sure last year we didn't have quite that many.
Right.
And the year before we didn't have quite that many.
More people out of work.
Yeah.
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 Yep, as I say, I enjoy helping.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy doing things,
Mm-hmm.
and especially helping people do things.
Any other stories that you can think of to share with us? Stories from your childhood or from your time in the military?
No, I have one little skit here. My two brothers were like 5 and 6 years older than I was, and they used to do things and get me involved. And the one day there was a stray dog. We lived on the farm. There was a stray dog, and I was to chase the dog around the building, and they were going to hit it with a pole.
Oh, goodness.
And it was a pole that my father used to measure, and it was 12 feet long.
Wow.
And they were going to, when the dog came around, they were going to hit him with that. Well, I chased the dog, but somehow he got under the building, under a corn crib, and I came around first, and they hit me, knocked me out.
No kidding.
Then they didn't know what to do because fortunately I came to before they got too involved in helping.
Goodness.
But
how old were you? Would you say?
I was probably 4 years old or so at that time.
You're lucky
maybe.
to be alive, Paul.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I tell you.
Because all I was doing was chasing the dog.
Well, you were doing what your big brothers told you to do.
Right. And
you got whacked.
Whacked, yes. Several times I got involved. One time, it was when they were tearing down those slave cabins. And I was there, and I'm only 4 or 5 years old, and I'm going to help. Well, my brother tells me that I'm too young for that to get out. And I made me mad, and I picked up this board, and I slammed it down. Well, it came back up.
Oh, no.
And I have a scar here by my eye where it hit me in the eye. That's what you get for being so mean.
Cantankerous.
Yeah.
Now, what did they use? Because in the old days on the farms, we used everything. They tore down the old buildings. What did they use the buildings for, the material from the buildings? You said it was stone fronts.
A lot of them were, the stone fronts, that's what they built a new road with.
No kidding.
The house was not quite a half mile off the road, and they built a completely new road with those stones. Broke them up and put them in. And they used all of those stones.
So the stones got used. The wood was probably too old for anything.
I'm sure that was just tossed.
That's interesting. So it didn't get wasted. Yeah.
And,
well, I tell you, Paul, it's been a real pleasure speaking to you today, and
it's been a pleasure having you.
Well,
I'll tell you.
Thank you for taking the time out of your day to sit with me and chat about your experiences. It's been very interesting.
Well,
and
it's nice to reminisce.
It is indeed, and it's nice to be 85 and still active in the community and still there helping other people.
That's the way I feel.
Yeah. Well, you're a special person.
But I don't want to give it up either.
Good for you.
Will do it as long as I can. And at the moment, I feel fine.
And you look fine.
Don't. I like to be around people. I've always been around people, working in the bank, and I remember I used to work in the what they call the bullpen, where you came in the lobby, and then there was a section where the desk.
Sure.
And I had a desk, and then one day I went and worked back at the counter, and this man came in and had a check, and he hands the check. Well, I called him by name. Well, I found out very quickly that you don't do that, because I called him by the wrong name.
Whoops.
And the person I had called him, they didn't get along very well, and he was very upset. But anyway, I learned that in a big hurry, that you look at the check before when you give the money back or something, you say by name, you know. So there's several things that happened like that. I enjoyed all of it, I'll tell you. I don't feel like I worked that hard, but I'm sure I must have, because to have gotten where I was.
Absolutely.
I had
Sure.
to.
Hmm. Well, Paul, again, it's been a pleasure speaking to you today.
It
Thank you
was
so
a
much.
pleasure having you.
Okay.
And
And I wish you a great day.
thank you very much. Appreciate that.